Let's take a couple minutes and we'll check out the initial and system setup menus on Pioneer's DEH-X3800S. So from any of the sources, I'm going to switch the radio off first. So press and hold the source button for a couple of seconds, and that switches the head unit off, but I still have the clock displayed on the screen. So now press in on the volume control, and we'll see two different menus here. The first one is the system menu, and if we roll over, we get the initial menu. Let's start with the initial menu, and we'll press enter there. The first thing we see here is our speaker and pre-out mode. And this is an important setting if you want to use subwoofer outputs for the RCA outputs on the head unit. So let's enter in here. And right now we see that my rear speaker output is set to full range and my rear RCA output is set to subwoofer output. If you want to change that, you can roll over. This changes the rear speaker output to subwoofer output and the rear RCA to subwoofer output. And we can roll over again, and we can change both the rear speaker output and the rear RCA output to full range output. For this demonstration, I want my rear RCA output to be the subwoofer output, but I want the rear speaker output to be full range. So we'll keep that setting right there. Now we're going to go back and roll over to our next setting, which is the Siriusxm Reset. If you have a Siriusxm tuner installed in the system, you can reset your Siriusxm tuner right here. We'll roll over to the next setting, which is the full system reset. You can reset the 3800 back to its factory settings from here. Let's roll over to the next setting. That takes us back around to our speaker and pre-out mode. And let's go back now and roll over to the system settings. That's the other part of this. And we'll enter the system settings. The first thing we see here is auxiliary input on. Here's our auxiliary input. If you use auxiliary on a regular basis, you can keep this switched on. If you don't use the auxiliary input, you can switch it off. And that means that when I press the source button here, auxiliary will not show up in my source list. If you want auxiliary to show up in your source list, just leave auxiliary switched on. We'll roll over to the next setting, which is our Android wired connection setting. This is important to you if you're an Android phone user. We can enter into this setting here. There's two ways to use the Android wired setting. One is from memory, and that means music that is stored on your Android device can be played back through USB. And we can also control apps, again through USB from your Android device. You can listen to the audio from nearly any app that is stored on your device, again through USB. And we can make that decision here. Right now I'm going to keep that for memory, which means it's music stored on my Android phone. Let's go back and roll over to the next setting, which is USB auto on. The USB plug right here can automatically switch to the USB source if you want it to, but it doesn't have to. If I switch USB auto off, I can plug in my phone and the system will not automatically switch to that source, but it will still charge my phone. I like the USB to automatically switch to the USB source when I plug in a thumb drive or something like that. So I'm going to switch USB auto on. And we'll roll over to the next setting, which is our clock set. Here we can get in to set the clock. When you're done setting the clock, you can go back and roll over to the next setting, which is our clock format, either 12-hour or 24-hour. I like to keep a 12-hour format on my clock. And we'll roll over to the next setting, which is our information display. The info display is the information in the display area right under the word info here. And there are a number of different things that we can show in that area. So let's enter in there. Right now we have the source showing. That would tell you whatever source you're on will show up in the info list there. We can also have the clock displayed there. We can have it turned off, which means no information will be displayed here. We can have a spectrum analyzer in that area or a level meter in that area. And we're back around to that source. So choose whatever you would like to show up in this area of the display right here with the info display. We'll go back, roll over to our next setting, which is back around to auxiliary. At any time, you can exit this menu just by pressing the source button.